Alright, hi everyone. This is not going to be a very well edited video, but right now I'm working on an Abacaba video which shows the most popular pages on Urban Dictionary over time. And I didn't know this, but Urban Dictionary actually goes all the way back to 1999, so that's 21 years of data. And I think in this video I just want to talk about like how I got all the data slash, hurdles, shortcomings, problems that I encountered along the way. So right now I'm actually still rendering frames of the video, and you can see like the bars are moving around. I'm getting like 2 frames per second, maybe it's 3 frames per second, because it's saving every frame to an image that I can then turn into an image sequence. So it's going to take another 3 hours to finish this segment, which is the second half of the video. Anyway, if you go to any okay, I'm going to grab the phone out of the tripod, so you're going to be moving with me. If you go to any Urban Dictionary page, and this is what I noticed back in February when I started this project. So this is the page for BFDI, which is the cartoon that Michael and I make. Anyway, if you go to the lower right, you'll find this activity graph that shows how often people were either reading the page or making definitions. I don't really know what it's measuring, but I guess it's just engagement or something, and you can see it over time. It's going up slowly. And basically, every single word has a graph like that. So if I exhaustively search through a list of 6,000 common slang words online, which is also somewhere else on the Urban Dictionary website, then I can sort of get a gauge of when each word was popular and how much more popular it was than other words. Because if you go into the page source, so right-click, view page source, and look at the raw HTML, and then do Control F for the word activity. Oh, I'm mistyping it. It's hard to type with one hand, Anyway, you get all these numbers, and these numbers are the exact data points of the graph. Ooh, dang. Okay, I need to get a new phone case because I can't hold this phone without a phone case very well. Anyway, these numbers here describe the exact data points of the graph on the page. So, if you just ask for the HTML in some code, some program you write for these numbers, then you can use that to construct a data set, which I did back in February before the COVID pandemic really hit the US. And then the pandemic happened, so then all my Abacaba videos turned into coronavirus videos. And so I put this project on hold, but then when July came around, I was like, this graph on Urban Dictionary, they all start in July 2012, so it might be fitting to end the graph in July 2020 because it's just an even 8 years. And I like the idea of seeing which slang words are rising and falling anyway, so I just want to make this video, stop procrastinating on it, and that's what I'm doing now. So I do want to mention that for the longest time, I think up until maybe June-ish, I was only planning on making this video go from 2012 to 2020, which is exactly what the graph I showed you shows. If you only look at the graph, you can't go before 2012. So I was thinking, 8 years of slang isn't quite long enough to get all the trends I want, but the world isn't perfect and you gotta just make do with what you have. But, in June, when I decided to increase the time range to 1999, I found this data set. Oh, I gotta take you out of the tripod again. On Reddit. So if you just Google Urban Dictionary dataset or something, you'll find this post on the subreddit r/datasets, and it's posted by user AQSWDE123456 3 years ago. It was actually posted, I don't know the exact year, but it has every definition posted to Urban Dictionary from 1999 to May 2016, and it's important that you remember it's only May 2016 because that means we can't use this data set for the most recent trends. And it's just a giant JSON file that's, I think, about a gigabyte in size, and it has about 6 million definitions along with their authors, their scores, and some other stats about them. It doesn't actually have the dates that the definitions were posted, which is a real bummer because that's super important in order to make, a video that is all dependent on the date. But the catch is that you can actually get all this data yourself by typing in something like urbandictionary.com/ some like PHP command. And if you do that for, let's say, word ID 1,276,493 or something, you will get a very short JSON text file for just that definition that has that exact ID. So if you've got enough time and you're okay with messaging the Urban Dictionary servers 10 million times, you can just iterate through every single ID and collect all the data yourself. I didn't want to do that because that could take a long time, or I could get my IP banned. So I decided that what I would do is download this data set by this Reddit user and then use a binary search on the IDs to kind of whittle it down so I could find the boundaries of each month. What do I mean by that? Well, if I know that every definition that was posted in the month of January 2016 is between the IDs of 1 million and 1.1 million, this is just a hypothetical, if I know that fact, then every time I get a word from this data set that has an ID between 1 million and 1.1 million, I can just assume it's from January 2016 because the IDs go up in chronological order. So instead of having to do millions of requests to Urban Dictionary's website, I only have to do, what is it? The size of the data set log 2 of that times the number of months in the data set, which is like 100. So that's probably somewhere around like 4,000, that's just a guess, requests to the website to find all the monthly boundaries. And then I can just use this 2 gigabyte file. Oh, it says 1.9 gigabytes right here. I can just use that and combine them, and then I have a month that I can ascribe to every definition that's in this data set. So because this earlier data set that goes from 1999 to 2016 is only counting people who actually post definitions and not people who are reading definitions, the data is a lot more sparse. The sample size is a lot lower. And because of that, I think there's a lot more randomness that goes on. The highest scores that some of the definitions get each month can range from like only 2 in the early days to maybe like 100 in the later days. Whereas the activity graph, I don't really know what the sample size is, but looking at the numbers, it ranges from 1 times e to the negative 7 for some very unpopular words, all the way up to like 1 times e to the negative 2. So that's 5 powers of 10, something like that. So that's why I want to use the activity graph whenever possible, because the data is just much smoother, larger sample size. Because there's always going to be dozens, maybe even hundreds of times more people searching for words than actually posting definitions of words. So I didn't want to have the video be 2 parts like it was, but eventually I had to do that. Okay, so I want to talk about a different hurdle that I encountered that I'm actually very frustrated about right now, and which is why I'm still rendering this video, even though it's been like days since it's technically been ready. So one thing that I do for these bars that I guess isn't required or typical is I will apply a Gaussian blur to the rank that each word is frame after frame. What that means is if you were to just naively look at a certain time, let's say June 1st, 2012, and ask what rank is the word hipster on June 2012, and maybe the program is coded exactly correctly and it can report you were second. That's fine and dandy. But then what if like the very next minute you fall to 3rd place? Because at some point 2 words will swap, and even though the value could be a continuous function, the rank is definitely not. It'll instantly drop from 2nd to 3rd. Now that's okay from a mathematical perspective, but from a video perspective, you don't want to have 2 bars instantly flip positions, because then your eye can't really track the transition between the 2. So what you want is, as the discontinuity of the rank is approaching, you want to smooth it out so that you slowly fall from 2nd to 3rd. So maybe halfway through you're 2.5th place, maybe 10 seconds later, or I guess in this video, like 0.2 seconds later, you're 2.9th place. So because of that, basically, you have a function that can calculate the exact mathematical rank at every point in time, and then you apply a Gaussian blur to everything, save that into a giant array, and then use that array to draw these bars, and that creates the smooth effect. But the question that can really mess things up is, how wide should this Gaussian blur be? Because if you make it too narrow, then the transition is going to be so quick that it's not going to be pleasant to watch and it's going to be hard to follow. But if it's too slow, then it'll feel like the bars are moving through molasses, and you won't actually see trends if they're too short in time. Because let's say a word only reaches the top spot for a month, which is in this video, 4 seconds. If your blur is larger than 4 seconds, then the bar will actually never hit first place because it's kind of blurred down to second place, third place, fourth place, so on. So you have to find a sweet spot where you can see the bar's movement clearly, but it's not so slow that it never hits the value you want it to hit. So I saw the Abacaba meme video, which is the code that I'm running to make this is the same one as the meme video. And I had a frame window of 11, which worked pretty well in the Abacaba meme video, but I wanted a little bit more snappy movement, so I changed it to 4 in this one. But then after I actually rendered the whole video, I saw how quickly they're moving, because 4 frames is only 1/15 of a second, and if you do that on both sides, it becomes 1/8 of a second. And so I was like, I need to re-render everything. It's kind of frustrating because you want to just change one trait about this video, but in order to do that, since almost every frame will be affected by this trait, since bars are always moving around, it's like it's not that you have to redo the last 5% of work. You have to redo everything. You have to start rendering back from the very start of the frame sequence and go all the way through again. So that's why I have to wait another 3-4 hours to re-render essentially every frame. And so I actually wrote some code in here that I never tested because I'm just trusting myself. And the code essentially says, you know, we have the larger frame window of 11, but look at every single bar that's on the screen. If none of them are moving, meaning none of them have a blurred value between 2 integers, then you actually don't need to resave the frame. And why is that? Well, because if none of the 15 top words are in their transitional phase at the setting of 11 frame window, then they wouldn't have been in a transitional phase when it was originally set in the 4 frame window, which I already rendered all of 2 nights ago. So it will have been the same, and I can just reuse the old image that I had already rendered. So I think because of that, you know, I wrote some code, I didn't test it, and like that itself could lead to more problems, but I'm just assuming that it works, and if it does work, I can save maybe half an hour of time because this code can now like zoom through those frames. It doesn't need to re-render. So I think this is a really kind of cost-benefit analysis sort of thing, because would you rather save half an hour of your time but take on the risk that the code that you write in order to save that time actually messes things up and like doesn't re-render frames that need to be? It's kind of like you're doing math in your head. You're calculating risk and reward in your head. And I think I hopefully trust these lines of code enough that I think I'll just save half an hour and I won't be punished at all. Because I can kind of tell when processing isn't saving frames when it should, because when it saves frames, it takes about 0.4 seconds or so to save a frame. But then if it starts moving every 0.1 seconds, like it's 10 FPS now, which is a lot faster, that means that it's not saving frames anymore. And then I would get suspicious because I see a bar moving, but it's not saving frames, and I'm like, you're not supposed to do that. So I would look at the code further. But right now it doesn't seem like that's happening. It says estimated time left 149 minutes, which is actually pretty good. 2.5 hours is a lot faster than my original prediction. Okay, so I'm just talking nonstop about a lot of boring things relating to this video. I was thinking if I release a Google form and I just simply ask people, do you remember any point in your life when you noticed other people were saying a slang word all of a sudden that you weren't familiar, well, you could be familiar with, but are you hearing this slang word for the first time, essentially? So I don't want you to say, oh, I hear the word, people saying the word dope, because in 2020, because like they've always been saying that, or at least my whole life, dope has always been a slang word to mean cool, or marijuana. So, okay, the question would be, like, do you recall an event in your life that you remember the year of, where people were suddenly starting to use a new slang word that you hadn't heard as frequently before. And the reason I want to do that is because there could be people much older than me, maybe in their 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, who have in their brains kind of access to data that I don't. Maybe they remember at their high school graduation, which they will know the exact year to, that people are starting to say the slang word, and that would be the year like 1971 or something. And the reason why it needs to be attached to an event that they remember the exact year to is because I don't want people to say, well, I feel like this word was starting to be used kind of in the 1970s, but I'm not sure, because there's just no way, that's too cloudy of a statement. And also, people's memories can be tainted and changed over time by things they're told later down the road. Like maybe an old person is told that the word groovy is actually pretty new, and they just like told that over and over again for whatever reason, even though that's not true. Then they'll kind of change and edit their memory in their head to say, well, I guess groovy wasn't in the 1970s, but it was in the 1990s or something. So to circumvent all of that, I only would ask for exact events that you remember the year to. So for me, if I started hearing people say, I don't know, one thing that happened in my middle school was people would say quad. I think it has to do with some video game, like quad meaning 4. Maybe it's like 4 kills at the same time in some first-person shooter. But I could use that as a data set because I knew that was happening in 8th grade, because my 8th grade history class is where all these troublemakers would just shout that over and over at the teacher. So I can say that safely it's 2010 to 2011, and that's not going to be wavering in time. And so because it's such a narrow window, I think if I can collect enough responses like that, I can get, line graphs with a new data point every single year. But the only problem is I might not get enough data. And especially given that most of my viewers are probably younger than me, or like 25 and under. I'm 23. I probably won't get much data from 70-year-olds, but that data is the most important because we already have so much data about the recent slang trends. That's what this whole video was about. But the people who remember the 50s and the 60s, that's the most treasured data. That's also the sparsest and hardest to find. So that doesn't mean I won't try. I mean, I think the coolest thing about the internet and like the fact that view counts can be in the thousands and millions is that if you ask people and 1,000 people respond, even if only 1% of those people are in their 70s, that's still 10 people, which is a lot. And if you get 1 million people to respond, then that would be 10,000 people, which is enough to kind of smooth out any randomness of random fluctuations. So I think it's a real numbers game that you're playing. It's really a case where a few extra zeros actually makes the difference between meaningful data and useless data. So that's something I could try in the future. And as I mentioned in the actual video, it's kind of what Tom Scott did in his video about Jingle Bells, Batman Smells. And I think that it's a surprisingly easy way to collect data, given that all my data sets in the past have been, just me kind of scouring the internet for something interesting to find. I can just construct something interesting to find. So what I mean by that is I always thought that Social Security's data on baby name trends from 1880 to 2018 is so exhaustive and so cleaned, sanitized, and easy to use that it just kind of feels like a gem in the rough. It's like you can't find something so easy to use anywhere else. But if I just, wanted it, I could just get it by doing the Google form thing. But that would only work with certain things that a huge chunk of the population is already quite familiar with. It's not going to work with things like, oh, which oil company sold the most money or had the most profits month after month. Like no one's going to know that unless they have the actual data. So it's very dependent on what kind of data you're looking for. But I think that data that people care about on YouTube is stuff that is known by millions anyway, such as memes, slang, baby names, whatever. So yeah. I mean, another thing I just wanted to talk about with Abacaba is that I think that since so many videos don't have my face or personality in them, it's just kind of a time lapse of bars moving around. no one feels attached to Abacaba videos. Like, nobody's a fan of Abacaba. So because of that, you know, when I made the Abacaba meme video, it got like 2 million views in the first couple days, but I only gained 10,000 subscribers, which sounds like a lot, but most viral videos, if they get around 2 million views, they should gain like 50,000 subscribers. And I think because, like, the reason that is because when people watch an Abacaba video, it seems like just sort of this corporate, faceless, personality-less content that was just produced out of the ether and is now on the internet. And they don't know me, and they don't see why they should subscribe, because there's no idea of like, oh, more content will come in the future from this channel. Like, you don't get that sense when you watch an Abacaba video. So the reason why the Tom Scott video about Jingle Bells, Batman Smells, why it really stuck out to me is that he's also talking about data year after year in this, and pointing out trends about that. And I think the way he does it gets people interested in the data, but it also gets them interested in him and wanting to subscribe to that personality. And I think that, you know, on Abacaba, I could do that as well. I guess the only way to know is to really just try it and see what the response is. Because I think that, you know, in all of the past, in the 5.5 years that Abacaba has existed as a channel, it's always been the case that I upload a video, it might go viral or it might not. And if it goes viral, there's like this huge spike about like a week, where in a week of time, it gets a ton of views, and then like after it dies down, just nothing. Like, you know, Abacaba has like lost subscribers in the last month. And I think that, you know, if I want to have a, you know, healthy YouTube channel, it's better to inject some personality into it. But I don't really know, because some people have also said like, you know, stop talking, I don't want to hear this voice, I'd rather just watch the bars. So I think this is a discussion that like I will get, you know, it's important for everyone to talk about, and then I can get a better picture of what the general audience wants. Yeah, okay, this video is going on for a while. I think, what else, is there anything else I want to mention? I don't really know. I think when I first collected this Urban Dictionary dataset in February of this year, I was very disappointed because the top results, it seemed month after month, were politicians. So Donald Trump, Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton. And I'm almost certain that's because, you know, if they won or lost a election, then there would just be a ton of people spamming joke definitions into Urban Dictionary. And also there's just a lot of trolls, or there's a lot of people kind of like trying to manipulate data. And so I think when I saw those trends, it just didn't feel like it was representative of what slang people were saying. So I spent so many days, and I kind of like regret spending these many days, like just filtering out politician after politician. I have this list of banned words. I guess I could show you, but I also banned words that were not slang, words that were just traditional, vanilla English dictionary entries. So I'll just read off a few. I banned school, home, mom, abortion, pineapple, woman, man, men, love, union, Labor Day, lacrosse, dog, tags, shade, love, cut, open-minded, government, head, so on and so on. And I think, you know, like that could be seen as like, oh, you're trying to fudge the data. But I think any reasonable person would realize that these words are not indicative of any slang trends. They're just English words that for some reason maybe someone wrote some scripts to send tons of views to this page to create a spike in the data, which is not legitimate. I also banned, I should mention this, I banned first names that did not have any connotation attached to them, because a ton of top Urban Dictionary pages are just names and then definitions talking about how nice that name is. So for example, I'm sure if you search like Michael, you'll get a definition that says like, Michael is an awesome, great guy who understands. Yeah, it says, okay, I'm literally reading the definition here. Michael's a sweet guy, he is pretty attractive, he can always make you laugh, he seems brave but he's sensitive, he believes he is never good enough, even though he is. So like this is the general vibe of almost all top definitions of common English names, because, you know, people want to upvote stuff that says nice things about them, and everyone at some point has searched their own name into Urban Dictionary. So I had to ban all of these as well because they weren't saying anything about rising or falling slang words that people were saying. However, the reason why this is such an important thing to mention is because some English names have become slang words, or they have meanings attached to them that they didn't in the past. So I'm sure you all know about Karens, right? How Karen is describing a stereotypically, well, I don't know if this is like okay to say or not, but like a middle-aged woman who, I guess, wants to speak to the manager, has that kind of pixie cut haircut down to their like shoulders or something, and is entitled, and you know the whole shebang. Like there's a whole meme about it. There's a whole subreddit called "Fuck You, Karen," and it's like, especially during coronavirus, you know, I guess middle-aged people who don't want to wear a mask or don't want to listen to regulations, those people are called Karens. So even though Karen is a common English name, when I searched Karen on Urban Dictionary, the top definitions are all talking about this new slang definition that didn't exist 5 years ago or something. So because of that, I kept Karen, but it is a little subjective which words to keep and which words to drop, because other words I did keep are Chad, because that also has a meaning, Kyle and Becky, and maybe a couple others I don't quite remember. But I think it's like putting too much power in myself to have the call about whether a name stays or dies. So I think that releasing a Google form about this is really helpful, because if I specifically ask for people to only include words that they think are slang, then they're not going to include the Michael, Emily, Ryan, like all these words that I was talking about having non-slang definitions. They would themselves only select words like Karen that they think are slang. So I don't have to do the filtering. I don't need to feel the guilt or the blame of like, you know, you should have kept this, you should have left this out. You know, that the weight of that decision making is left on the audience, the survey makers. And I trust that, you know, there will be some troublemakers in the survey takers, but as an average, as a whole, people will make the right decision about which words to keep and which words to drop. I also filtered out slurs, especially racial slurs, because those were surprisingly high on the list. But I did not filter them out, or I filtered out like a lot fewer slurs in the first half because, there's just so many more definitions that I'm dealing with that it just felt better just to like dump the data as I received it. So I filtered out like the worst slurs, but I couldn't, search for all of them because I would have to read them. And I think there's like over 1,000 in the first half. Anyway, I think this is all to say that you can never... Wait, hold on. Okay, this is in October. My rendering is in October of 2014, and I need to get all the way to July 2020, so that's going to take so long. But yeah, it's like, if you want to find a data set that doesn't require any filtering or kind of subjective tampering on the collector's side, you're looking for a unicorn. I think that almost every data set will have certain little flukes, errors, certain trends that you don't want to see, that if you don't filter them out and you say like, this is just the true data as it was, you're just going to get garbage everywhere. You're going to get slurs, you're going to get repeat words. Oh, I should mention, there are also repeats because things like ACAB showed up, but also A period C period A period B period also showed up, and Urban Dictionary will report the same data for both. So it literally looked like two bars just moving in synchrony. So I filtered out the one with periods, but I kept ACAB in general because, that is a phrase that people are saying, rightfully so, and, it also shows trends in, I guess what young people are talking about in 2020. Also dates like November 30th, August 1st, October 2nd showed up a lot, so I filtered those out as well. And, Urban Dictionary is known for having lots of sexual definitions, but I tried to filter out words that were just sexual and not even slang. So if you were to open up an anatomy textbook and just read out the textbook words, those aren't slang, so I filtered those out. Okay, I think, let me just show you the list. There's more to this code too, but, I don't know if the text is big enough. Okay, actually, I'm not going to show it because I just scrolled up and I saw a bunch of slurs and I don't want those to be in my video. But there's a lot more going on behind the scenes because I also had to filter out blips because sometimes Urban Dictionary would have a graph that was like, all low activity and then a single blip going way high and then no evidence that ever happened anywhere else. Like if you looked at Google Trends, there would be no blip. If you looked at the residual effects afterward, no blip. If you look at the number of definitions, there aren't more definitions on that date. So I would have to filter those out because the only explanation I can have is just that, someone wrote a script to reload this page over and over again. And yeah, so that would also be another problem fixed by the Google form, is that I don't think I would get blips, or I don't know. Yeah, I've been talking for literally half an hour at this point. But yeah, basically a lot goes on behind the scenes, and I think creating each new bar graph requires coding a lot of new things. So for example, in the corner of this new one with Abacaba, you get this Billboard #1 song, whichever song was topping the Billboard charts on this month. And I had already used this sort of like image. Like the reason I have it is because I want to instill in people's minds like what vibe, what kind of culture were people experiencing in November 2014? Because maybe that number doesn't mean anything to you. But then you hear Shake It Off, Taylor Swift, and then you remember like what was I doing when I was hearing the player's gonna play, and the hater's gonna hate. When you hear that, then like it can help, cement in your mind like where you were at that time. So I had this data set of an image per month, and every image like shows the #1 Billboard song. And I used that in a few other videos like the Stack Overflow Tags video. But when I was making this video, I noticed that the top song for January 2020, it claimed it was All I Want for Christmas Is You by Mariah Carey, or her cover of it. And the reason it did that is because when I look at the top Billboard chart, I load the Billboard Hot 100 list for the first week of that month, because Billboard is a weekly updating chart. But the first week of January 2020 was actually December 28th to January 3rd or something like that. And so there were still Christmas songs on this list, but that wasn't representative of all of January 2020. So I decided to myself, a more accurate thing to do is to find the middle week of every month, which week includes the 15th of the month, and just save that. So because of that, I essentially had to rewrite and resave every Billboard image, because maybe it was the same, maybe it's different. A lot can change in the 2-week shift that I did. But because of that, January 2020 now shows an actual other song that was popular at that time. I think it was The Box by Roddy Ricch. But, all these little things where it's like, oh, I want to change this one thing that's like a very small part of the video. Well, unfortunately, that small part of the video appears for the entire duration of the video. So because processing is rendering each image frame after frame, you have to re-render the whole thing. And I think it's a little frustrating that this is how it is. Maybe if there's a more ideal way to kind of save a video format, like maybe you could save a portion of each image across all of time but not have to redraw the entire image. Like that's just not the way it works in processing. But I think, maybe in the future someone can develop code that can draw graphics into a video more efficiently, so that I can change, just the smallest corner at the top of the video and not redraw everything. I think I'm repeating myself at this point, but basically I think that there's a lot of inefficiencies with the way I make videos, and when I make a video, it sometimes feels like, oh, it's just 11 minutes of work. That's not that much. People can make an 11-minute video in a day, but even though I could technically do that, I keep making these small tinkering fixes that require me to re-render things, and because that takes like 3 to 6 hours, I just do it overnight, and suddenly the video is a day later. And that is just the way that Abacaba is. By the way, I think the style with Abacaba is that each video is 60 frames per second, which means that for this video, the second half is like 6 minutes or something, so that comes to like 20,000 images, and then the first half is another 15,000 images. And yeah, I think that it just feels like, oh my god, I'm going to be saving 35,000 images to my hard drive and then frame sequencing them into a video. And I think that there's probably another way to do this more efficiently. There's probably another way to save each frame into a video file that can be compressed as you go, so that it's not, you know, repeating duplicate data of things that don't change. But processing doesn't work that way. Maybe we should just not use processing anymore. Who knows? Oh, and then another thing that I ran into was one of the slang words that showed up was the shrug emoji. You know, the one that has like upper score / lower score, and then there's like the Japanese katakana for the smiley face. That didn't exist in the font that I was using to display these words. I was using some bold and condensed version of Helvetica to draw these. So it would just not display the smiley face, so it would look like a shrugging person with no face, and that was not good. And I tried to figure out, like, how can I get that katakana in there? I'll try to switch the font. Well, it still didn't show up even in Arial, or I don't know. So I was like, okay, I'll save an image file of the emoticon, and then in the special case that the emoticon shows up, instead of showing text of the name, I'll draw the image. But the image needs to be correctly sized because, you know, there's a specific font size for the font, but the image might be like different, I don't know. And then like you still need to get the text width because the definition starts at the, you know, higher x coordinate of the title. So that got really confusing. But then there's also Korean that shows up in the definition of kek, because kek originated from the Korean, I don't know how to pronounce it, laughing character, and that got a little confusing to put in Korean in there as well, because that also had to be turned into an image file, but it was an image file that was appended to the end of actual text, so I had to line those up. And I think all these little things really add up, and I feel like it's super inefficient from a human working standpoint. It's not too bad from a computer standpoint because they can just run at night, but it would just be easier if I used something like Flourish, you know, that some library, I think it's like a Python library that'll create bar graphs, and then screen record that, like, which is all the other bar graph channels seem to do. But I don't, because I want to have a lot of control over how my videos look. But yeah, okay. This video will finally come out July 2020. I probably spent about like 5 days working on it back in February, and then another 5 days now. So it's probably like just 10 days total, but it is just, you know, it'll be a big relief when it's finally online. And I don't think I'll spend this much time on a project again, just given that, like, you know, when Tom Scott makes his video about jingle bells, you know, he's not rendering 35,000 images. Like, you know, when he gets the data, he can just like talk about it. And like, I'm sure the editor has to do a lot of work to, like, you know, make all the graphics show up at the right time. But that's like a more traditional video editing that video editing software is specialized for. So you won't have to ever like re-render the whole thing just to fix a small portion. And it would be, for a human, a lot faster to make. So I think that's why I already have this want to switch to more commentary style data videos, but I still want to ask you guys what you think. So okay, I've been talking for almost 40 minutes now, so I'm probably going to end it here. Bye. Thanks for watching. Bye.